Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to day 8 of 28 days of science fiction. And we're now on shelf 8, which is just outside of camera range here. And it continues on from shelf 6, because shelf 7 was like the larger books. But shelf 6 is where I was getting into the autobiographical, biographical, critical material of specific authors that are put together. Now, the top shelf here is Isaac Asimov. Writings he's done about himself, critical material about Isaac Asimov. And I've realized by pulling it all off that it's not everything that I do have of Isaac Asimov, but that's all I have together at the moment. I don't think there's anything else lurking down below here in the other shelves, but there might be, and we'll get to them if that is the case, and then move them up. So we'll start out with volume 1 of Isaac Asimov's sprawling autobiography, In Memory Yet Green, the autobiography of Isaac Asimov, 1920 to 1954. He was born January 1st, 1920. Or thereabouts, in Petrovich, is that correct? The pronunciation, in Russia at the time, and his parents emigrated when he was very young to the United States. I'm just looking here to see if I could see the name. The Soviet Socialist Republics. Let's see here. I don't see the name jumping out here just off the top. Yeah, Petrovich, I guess it is. Petrovich. He's got here how it's pronounced. Petrovich. Somewhat like that. Anyway, this is quite detailed. It's a lot of reminiscent of his early stuff about his family that he gleaned from his parents and other family members. It was published in 1979 by Doubleday and Company. It's big. It clocks in at over 700 pages, and he kept a meticulous diary as well of things that went on a daily basis for a long time. So he used that as the basis for a lot of this material for his memories, because he puts in dialogue of what people spoke about. So it's, you got to take it a little bit with a grain of salt, but until somebody does a more detailed history or biography of Isaac Asimov, then this is sort of it. There's a lot of material in here regarding authors and his writing itself, because something that he did in every collection of his own writings, especially, he would put interstitial material in, writing about himself and what was happening at the time. So there's a lot of material here, which is very, very useful if you want to look up when he was writing a certain story or certain book. And as I say, there's a lot of bibliographical detail where you normally don't get anywhere else. But anyway, yeah, this is very good. I read this for the second time a number of years ago, doing the future history project, and then volume 2 is Enjoy Still Felt, and these are, for those keen-eyed, will see that they are actually quotes from a poem. Now, off the and I don't see it here. Is it in the first one? I forget who the poet is now, off the top of my head. No, it doesn't say. Anywho, it is from a poem, but it escapes me at the time. I'm sure somebody else probably knows. Or if you want to look it up, you can see In Memory Yet Green, Enjoy Still Felt. So this is 1954 to 1978. As I say, the first volume was published in 1979, and this one in 1980 by Doubleday and Company. And he continues along with this. And there's a checklist of all his books, because at the time he was doing this, I think it was like over 300 books that he had written and or edited, and he kept the tally. And he, as I said, with the first one, it's a lot of biographical information, bibliographical information about his writings. Then he followed this up again with a third volume called I, Asimov. I, Robot, I, Asimov, a memoir. But he took a different tact with this. And this was published in 1994 after his death, but it doesn't go right up, obviously, to his death. Now, he took a different tact with this. He rather than chronological, he would put, he went over some of the same material in the first two volumes, but also he would write about specific authors. Like he would use Donald Wollheim, there's early sales, John W. Campbell, Robert Heinlein, Clifford Simak, Jack Williamson, Lester Del Rey, Theodore Sturgeon, specific highlights in his life, and things like anti-Semitism, growing up, long hours, pulp fiction, science fiction, beginning to write, humiliation, failure, and so forth. And this was published by Doubleday and Company as well, or Doubleday as it was known at that time, in 1994. It is, again, a bit shorter than the others, but it still clocks in at over 500 pages. Now, as I say, he died in 1992, so to sort of bridge the gap between that, this was published by Janet Jepson Asimov, or edited. Isaac Asimov, It's Been a Good Life, and this takes us up to his death, including everything that happened to him as he died. And this was published in 2002. Yeah, it's a lot shorter, but there's a lot of material. Well, it's done as material written by Isaac Asimov and put together by Janet Jepson, or things that were told to her on his deathbed. Now, there's one other biography here that somebody had written. It's not very good. It's called Asimov, The Unauthorized Life by Michael White. This was published by Millennium Books in 1994. It's basically just, cribbing from the earlier volumes mostly, and then some material that is sort of gleaned or guessed at about his last days. It's not very good, to be honest. Now, Isaac Asimov, during his life, he wrote tons of stuff. He wrote about 1,500 essays, a lot of them for the magazine of Science Fiction and Fantasy. He became their sort of science columnist for decades, actually. But he also wrote essays for other magazines, like when Isaac Asimov magazine came along, he wrote a lot of editorials for there and other articles. Now, he wrote on various subjects, and he would collect the essays if thematically, like say on physics or on astronomy or chemistry, history, and you name it. Now, there's 2 volumes. It's Asimov on Science Fiction, and this is the British edition by Granada, and it was originally published, let's see here, in 1991, but this is the first Granada printing in 1981. If I said 91, it's 1981, and this is 1983 by Granada. And it's just literally a number of essays on his take of what science fiction is, science fiction in general. Let me see if there's there's a contents page. Science fiction in general, the writing of science fiction, the predictions of science fiction, the history of science fiction writers, science fiction fans, science fiction reviews, science fiction, and I. So yeah, and they're really, really good, and I like his writing. Period. So especially him writing on science fiction is absolutely fabulous. And then he followed it up with Asimov's Galaxy: Reflections on Science Fiction, another volume with more material. And let me see if I can find there's a little essay in here about Susan Calvin. Susan Calvin was the roboticist in I, Robot and a number of short stories. Now, he predicted that she was born on a certain day. I think it was 1982. Now, somebody sent him in April of 1982 that of an Australian newspaper put out, or somebody put a letter, that there was a child born by a family called Calvin, and she was born on, it says here, Calvin, to Elizabeth and Jeremy, a daughter, Susan, born the 30th of March, 1982. Sincere thanks to Dr. Asimov from all who have long awaited this event. And so he says, in other words, 1982, on 30th of March, 1982, to be exact, Susan Calvin was born exactly as I had predicted in 1950 and 3 decades before. He says he did get this on April 1st, so but he says he never followed it up. So, but I just thought it was a really fun little story, and it just continues on very similarly with the first volume. Just science fiction in general, science fiction writing, and so on. Now, this wasn't the end of his writing about science fiction, because this was published in 1989. So there was a few more years left, and a few things that were now collected. Now, there was a final couple volumes that were, I think they were done posthumously, called Gold and then Magic. Gold is sort of the uncollected stories, a few, and that were not in previous collections, but also it includes a few more essays. We'll get to that book eventually in the fiction section. And then the same with Magic, which is the fantasy that he'd written. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, we've got a collection edited by his brother, and it's Yours, Isaac Asimov, A Lifetime of Letters, edited by Stanley Asimov. This was published by Doubleday again in 1995. Yes, 1995. It's interesting. He wrote tons of letters. All this material is at the University of Boston. Thousands upon thousands of letters. Usually very short. These are not chronological. They don't say who they're to. For the most part, they're done thematically, so it's a bit of a pain. So as you can see, like he wrote a lot of letters, but not lengthy letters a lot of time. But they are interesting. Now, as I say, he wrote hundreds and hundreds of books, or edited hundreds and hundreds of books. And for some reason, I don't know if this has been done before, because it's sort of unprecedented for me in books. But every 100 books that he wrote, or at least almost every 100, he put out a 100th book. Like, for instance, the after the 99th book he published, he put out a 100th book called Opus 100. And there it is, the books piled up around him. Now, what it is, a guided tour through the first 99 books of America's foremost science writer. And this was published, this is the 100th book in 1969. And he goes through different subjects like astronomy, robots, mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, words, history, the Bible, short stories, humor. And he will put in little snippets of those books in here. Pardon me. Including some interstitial material, like biographical material, prefacing usually the selections and why, how they sort of came about to be written. And that was the first of them. And the second is Opus 200. And there he is sitting on his first 200 books, or the next maybe 100. I'm not sure. I think it's all 200. So he goes from 101 to 199. And this was Houghton Mifflin, 1979. I didn't give a... I said 1969, but I didn't say who. That was Houghton Mifflin as well, the Opus 100. So he does the exact same thing here with Opus 200. He goes through each book, gives a little bibliographical sort of sketch and other things, biographical information that was happening at the time. And even like he will say how much he was paid for some things, but he stopped doing that even in his autobiography around the early 70s because he started making a lot of money. And he didn't spend a lot. So it's being the author's favorite selections from his second 100 books. Now, the last one he did, he stopped at Opus 300. He wrote almost 500 books, so he didn't do it for 400, nor for if he did reach 500. So we got Opus 300. It's a little thicker. This was published by Houghton Mifflin again in 1984. And same deal. Just selections from the items or the books involved, with biographical and bibliographical information preceding each entry. Now, as I say, he collected all these essays together, like science essays as well. Everything, every time he got enough stories together for short stories to put out a individual volume of collection of the stories. And again, he put this interstitial material with regarding to the story itself, because he kept a very clear, detailed journal and diary. But he did that with not just with the short stories. He did it with his essays too. And I've got a few. They're a little harder to find now. I used to see them 25, 30 years ago just everywhere because he wrote so many. But I've got a few, and this is the Tyrannosaurus Prescription and 100 Other Essays. These are more general essays, but science essays nonetheless. This was published by Prometheus Books in 1989. And it's like he's got the future, space, science, sci-quest, forwards of books, which are always interesting, on science fiction, which they should have been reprinted in the second volume, but they may not. I haven't actually compared exactly. And then personal little writings. So that's in this one here. Now, the other one that I have, and I'm pretty sure I got one or two more, but this is Life and Energy by Isaac Asimov, an exploration of the physical and chemical basis of modern biology. So this is the UK edition by Dennis Dobson, and this was published originally 1962 from the US and 1963 in the UK. And so he goes into energy, the body, two sections with essays. And he'll, expand if they are pulled, a lot of them or most of them are going to be pulled from essays that he's already written, and usually at this time, in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. So now we move on to sort of critical material about Isaac Asimov. Now, as I say, I don't have everything to hand here. Now, one of the earliest and best critiques of his writing was written by James Gunn. This is the new revised edition. The Foundations of Science Fiction. Isaac Asimov, The Foundations of Science Fiction, second edition, or revised edition. And this was published by Scarecrow Press in 2005. And it goes through sort of a critical aspect in discussion of his, like, Foundation, variations on the robot, short stories, robot novels, and other novels. The Stuff Itself is a title, and a checklist of his works. And this was, 2005. It originally was published by Oxford University Press in 1982. I'd love to get the first edition of it in hardcover. This, I don't know if it was published in hardcover. This one, it probably, no, it may not be, because it's all they're giving is an ISBN for the paperback, because Scarecrow Press is very pricey on their material. So now we go into just an interesting one that Donald E. Palumbo he's the series editor for this. It's Critical Explorations in Science Fiction Fantasy. This is number 51. It's on an Asimov companion, characters, places, and terms in the Robot / Empire / Foundation meta series. So the future history. And it's very short. Again, it's McFarlane. These are very expensive books, and there's a whole listing of what they have in the series. The series editors are Donald E. Palumbo and C.W. Sullivan III. McFarlane and Company, published in 2016, and it's got an introductory essay, but it's also got entries in, which is quite useful, because every so often, if you haven't read something for a long time, you can just pull up and like, for instance, if you want to know where Daniil is throughout the series, you've got little, well, it says fairly large, but it starts there and it continues on for a page and a bit. Now, this is an older one that was written by Joseph E. Petrucci Jr., The Science Fiction of Isaac Asimov, and it's an older volume. Let's see, it was published by, this is the British edition, Dennis Dobson, London. Originally published in 1974, but in the UK in 1978. And it goes through the earliest Asimov, its critique of his stories, critical material, and then the Foundation novels, Asimov collections, and then its most recent Asimov. But as I say, it only goes up to the early 70s. And as I say, I am missing quite a few books here that I know that I have. So this isn't complete. And this is an interesting series as well. It is Conversations with Isaac Asimov, University Press of Mississippi, edited by Carl Friedman, and this was published in 2005. And it's exactly what it says. It's interviews by various people in different places. Like, there's an interview with Isaac Asimov, 1979, by James Gunn, Playboy magazine, or I thought it was Playboy, but maybe not. But I'm sure he has been interviewed by Playboy. This is Plowboy interview. Okay. And it just goes on to different interviews, and it just reprints those interviews. And there's a whole series of these. See, what's do we have a series name here for this? I know there's other volumes. I believe I have one for Ray Bradbury as well. Now, here's something similar. Talks with the Masters is Conversations with Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, and James Gunn. It's it's a Wild Side press book. It's very, very thin. It's a print on demand. And these were conducted by George Zabrowski edited by Pamela Sargent, who we saw a bibliography of her, and we'll see some novels of hers. So Wildside Press in 2018, but as I say, it's print on demand with a little interview of Asimov. Now we've got the Borgo Press, who we've come across, did a series of companion books to science fiction authors, and they called them the Starmont Reader's Guide. We'll see a few throughout here in the original form, but they have been reprinted by digital printing in this ugly design, very ugly design. But this is Isaac Asimov's book by Donald M. Hassler, and this was published by Borgo Press. But as I say, I think I mentioned before, Wildside Press bought out Borgo Press, and now it's mostly digital printing. And this was originally a Starmont Reader's Guide in 1991, so shortly before his death. Just a very, very brief, extremely brief, a description of his writings and a biographical sketch. Now, here's something that is quite, again, this is Donald E. Palumbo, and this is part of the Greenwood Press Contributions to the Study of Science Fiction and Fantasy. This is number 100, so there's a lot of them. But this is an awful cased digital reprint of that book, and I bought this from Amazon US, and they shipped it to me. It went down to extremely cheap and did not say it gave the original printing date. Now, this is Chaos Theory, Asimov Foundations, and Robots, and Frank Herbert's Dune. Greenwood Press, originally published in 2002. Now, it's the fractal aesthetic of epic science fiction. However, there's issues with it. There is, well, not just the terrible binding of it and the plasticized covers, which I hate. Now, there is a page, as you can see, page not printed. There's pages missing throughout this, and they just refunded my money, and it's just it's a horrible reprint, and it's an example of very poor editorial guidance for this reprint. It's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible, but it's the only thing I've got at the moment. I'd love to get an original cloth-bound edition from this, and it would have been one of the green ones or a blue one. As you can see here, the green ones here, and there's more probably down here, but yeah, it's just anyway. Or I find an e-book of it and then print out the pages that are missing and sort of tip them in. Hence, I've not read much of this. I've read bits of it using the index, but as I say, it's a faulty book. Now, the last one that I have here, and it's not the last. I know there's more. Because there's a Twain's guide to Isaac Asimov that I have, and a number of other ones that I know are around somewhere, and I hope they're still in boxes. So we've got the Writers of the 21st Century series, edited by Joseph D. Olander and Martin H. Greenberg, who co-edited tons and tons of books with Isaac Asimov. Now, don't get confused with Martin Greenberg, who started up Gnome Press. This is Martin Harry Greenberg, Martin H. Greenberg, different people. And this was one of their volumes, and it's there's an afterword by Isaac Asimov as well. And it's a collection of essays written by a number of authors on Asimov's foundation novels, human reactions to technology change in Asimov's fiction, and it just goes other ones. And not everybody is is complimentary of his writing, and especially the Foundation series. But they're interesting nonetheless. And this was published by Paul Harris Publishing in 1977. Now, it was a whole series. There were a lot more planned. I've got every volume, I believe, that actually was in print except Philip K. Dick's. I missed getting that a couple of years ago. That's the most expensive volume from the series. But it is a great series because of the essays and the breadth that they take for this. So that is the last volume that I have of the Isaac Asimov critical material and material written by him. So we'll move on next, and we'll continue on with the same theme with different writers, and not everything. Like I won't have a whole shelf. This is dedicated to a whole shelf because I have a whole shelf, and then across here is nope, it's the other way. Across the top, this bookcase is still nonfiction material, and then the third bookcase is. The third bookcase begins the fiction, and across the top, I just left it that way with Isaac Asimov fiction. So we'll get to that as well eventually after we go through the rest of these. But I'll see you next time, Book 2.